I'm excited to be here among so many accomplished men and women, professionals from whom I continually learn, not only my associates from Janney, Universal Health Services, and Penn Mutual, who inspire me day after day, but also women I know only by reputation, whose storied careers inspire me just the same. I also want to add my congratulations to the Forum of Executive Women on their 40th anniversary. I've been asked to share my story as I've not had the privilege to meet everyone in the room. Reflecting back, it seems to me that the significant point of my story, and very likely your stories too, is the choices it has presented. Some easy, some hard. You look at my official bio, middle management to VP at Equitable, senior VP at Guardian, president at New England Financial, chief marketing officer to president to CEO and chairman at Penn Mutual. It looks like a straight line, point A to point Z. It wasn't like that at all. I've gone forward and sideways and occasionally backward. But one theme has been consistent throughout: making authentic choices. The first big choice was one I imagine many of you face too: picking a college major. When I started college, I had a long talk with my father. As a school principal, he had advised a lot of kids. He suggested I go for a career that would allow me to turn aside for marriage and family and come back later: nursing or education. I was offered a nursing scholarship, which was hugely important in a teacher's family, so I majored in nursing. But the day I entered Malloy College, I knew in my heart I would never be a nurse. I had a hunger for something out of the box, something with a wider horizon. I was fascinated with what was called microcomputers. Computers appeal to my taste for analysis and rationality and problem solving. So I changed my major to math and computer science. I chose to follow my heart, to be authentic and to grow. I had intended to become a programmer analyst, but in my very first job at Wang Labs, I discovered a broader interest in finance. I went back to school for an MBA and landed a position at Equitable Life, now known as AXA. That was my introduction to an industry that I've grown to love. The financial services industry was dominated by men. There were very few women in leadership positions. But I set a goal for myself: vice president by age 30. Some of the people I worked with said, "Are you kidding? Do you see any women at that level? Do you see anyone at your age?" I refused to allow that to limit me. I chose to believe in myself and gave the opportunity to others to believe in me. I chose to neutralize the glass ceiling by taking my gender off the table. I worked hard. I watched the people I sought to be one of, to learn what needed to be done. I took assignments where I could learn what I needed to know. And I didn't try doing it by myself. I sought out the people who could help me where I wanted to go. I asked for help and got it. People were glad to help me, both women and men. They cared about my performance, not my gender. When you're on someone's team, they want you to succeed. Your success is their success. And a lot of these men had daughters my age, daughters who were just starting out. They got it. My principal mentor was the head of my business area. Mike Martin was a huge influence in my career. Mike believed in me. He showed me the ropes, and he encouraged me in my ambitions. And when I established a track record, he went to the mat to get me where I needed to be.
We had a need for an officer level position in the areas where she had shown expertise. budgets and administration, and this was essentially the chief operating officer of our region, which was bigger than some small companies. And I tapped her for that assignment, and she accepted it. We had a little work to do because it was an officer level position. She had not been an officer at that point, and they wanted to make her an assistant vice president. And I argued that the job was a vice president's job, not an assistant vice president job. And although she was young, she was very talented. And that I believe that in our particular organization, she wouldn't have the political capital that she would need to help manage the things we had to manage. We had strong managers, very strong branch managers, some of the strongest in the industry. They were all men. Eileen was going to have to face off with them on the operating issues in running their branches and their budgets, and I thought it was very important for her to have the full vice president title to enable her to do that in the right way.
So I was VP for Equitable's Northeast region at age 27, 3 years ahead of schedule. And now I face the challenge of leading my piece of the organization. The economy was growing through a rough period, and the Home Office had decided we needed to cut costs. Well, I was all budget and finance. This was my turf. But dealing with those branch managers was new territory for me. I went to Mike for advice, and he basically waved me off. "You'll figure it out," he said.
Eileen said to me, "You know, I don't know enough about the job. You've got to help me if we're going to do this together." And she said, "I know 50% of the job. I know budget and finance, but I don't know anything about the agency system and how do you deal with these managers and the top producers and how do you communicate with them and what do you do?" And I essentially said, "You'll figure that out. You're smart. I can help coach you on some of that stuff. You come to me when you need to come to me on those issues, and we'll talk about them. But you'll figure it out. I'm not concerned about that."
When I started calling the branches to help find ways to reduce expenses, practically the first guy I talked to said, "Eileen, I don't even talk to my wife about how I spend my money. I'm not going to talk to you." I said, "Tell you what, I'm going to hang up the phone and I'm going to call you back and we're going to pretend that this conversation didn't happen." I had no problem with him. It was scary, for about 30 seconds? But Mike was right. I figured it out. That was an important lesson for me. Your mentor isn't there to do the things for you that you can do for yourself. Your mentor can empower you. They can put you in a position to act, but the action has to be yours. Over the next 10 years or so, I rose steadily. I moved from Equitable to Guardian, where I eventually was named Senior Vice President, the first woman in that role in their 150-year history. I was close to the top. I had worked very hard for many years, but I didn't always work smart. I didn't always delegate. I tried to do too much stuff myself. I was burning out. On top of that, I learned that my father was in the last season of his life. I stepped away from career to be with my family. It was a no-brainer. It was an easy choice. It gave me time to step back and think about what I wanted from my career, what choices I wanted for my life. The choices I had made in the past empowered me to make the right choice now. Being with my dad during his final days is something I will always treasure. As I hoped, I had no difficulty finding another position. At this time, MetLife. And as it happened, I moved up again, almost as soon as I got there. Accounting problems came to light at a subsidiary. The president was gone, and they asked me to take the job. I was at the top, president, in the middle of an SEC investigation. It was baptism by fire. I saw pretty quickly that the financials were a nightmare. The company needed restructuring, roles needed to be redefined, people needed to be moved, and one of those people was me. One of my major jobs was putting myself out of work. It wasn't a devastating position. Taking the business to pieces didn't play to my strengths. I'm a business builder. And my earlier sabbatical had revealed a great void in my own life. I grew up in a large and loving family. I always thought I would have family of my own. In my hunger for achievement, this had escaped me. But now I found myself hungry for something else. So I made another choice. But I planned this time. I stepped away from the workplace and redirected my career to consultancy and teaching so I could work from home and welcome Claire into my life, the center of my life. And I chose not to return until I found the right place to be, a place where my daughter and my home and my family could remain the center of my life. When I did return, it was hard. I'd spent my entire life in the New York area with my family right in the neighborhood, and now I had to pick up stakes and move all the way across the country to Philadelphia. I knew I couldn't do this without my Bedrock support group, so I persuaded them to join me. I resettled almost my entire family, my mother, brother, sister, niece, and nephews, to this wonderful place we now call home. I've been at Penn Mutual for 9 years now. 6 months after I joined, the bottom fell out of the economy. I made a choice. I needed to make my fellow associates believe that Penn Mutual would not participate in the recession, and we didn't. In 2010, we defined the next 10 years as a decade of opportunity. In fact, we reached our 2020 goals by 2016 and refocused on 2025. We've been recognized this year by Ernst & Young as Entrepreneur of the Year for the Philadelphia region. I'm particularly proud that we were honored not in the financial services category, but in the transformation category. Pretty remarkable for a company that's 170 years old. In focusing on making the company success, it became a personal success for me too. I've risen from head of marketing to chief executive officer and now chairman of the board. But my daughter and my family still occupy the center of my life. I'm protective of my time, away from the people I love and those who depend on me. I'm only one person. I can't do everything. That's the choice I've made. So here I am, more or less at the top of my profession, CEO and chair of a thriving, growing company. So what's my job now? How do I continue to lead and inspire others? How do I remain inspired? What is leadership anyhow? To me, it means different things at different times. I'd like to highlight 3 aspects of leadership that have served me well over time. The first is servant leadership. Being a leader doesn't mean, hey, there's a new sheriff in town. From now on, we're going to be doing things my way. Quite to the contrary. Being a leader means empowering those around you, allowing them to succeed while being authentic, doing things their way. It means presenting opportunities and allowing for choice so they can accomplish the task at hand and find a sense of balance and fulfillment in their work. Servant leadership can start with very small things that grow into very big things. I discovered that at Equitable. I offered one of the women on my team, Tracy Gray Walker, what may look like a pretty small choice, but Tracy had an autistic son, a child with special needs, means a mom with special needs. This choice meant a lot to her.
I had to do a road trip. And she gave me a choice. She said, do you want to drive and take your family? Or do you want to fly and then you can just go up and back? I said, well, I hadn't thought about that. I just automatically assumed that I would drive. She said, you have choices, right? So you make those choices and you make the choice that's best for you and your family. And I took my son and my husband, and we all went and we did the couple of city trip that I had to do. And what I learned from that experience was nothing had to be cut and dry. Nothing had to be black or white. There was always a way to look at things from different angles, and you could give your team choices that they would feel better about you, your style, and the demands of the job at the same time while getting the job done. You have to meet people where they are and manage or coach them differently. You cannot do a one-size-fits-all for people that are on your team. It doesn't have to be my way as long as it's done the right way.
As you move up the ladder, you have to be a servant leader to more and more people. You must never forget that every one of them has special needs, their own needs. Leading means choosing to serve those needs. And as Tracy said, there's a bigger lesson to be learned. From giving people more freedom and flexibility, the lesson of what I understand is the core principle of shared leadership. Dedicating your efforts to meeting people's needs has to start with listening to their needs. If you want to keep great people on your team, you must help them grow and position them to succeed. That is, to succeed at what they want to succeed at. You have to give them permission to lead. You have to share leadership with them. Shared leadership isn't just delegation. That's, I've decided what we need to do, this, and this, so now go get it done. Shared leadership means identifying people who understand what needs to be done better than you do, and putting them in positions where they can lead effectively. People like Jim Mann, who I tapped to lead Penn Mutual's flagship Philadelphia agency.
I really felt that the financial services industry needed a significant change, a directional change. When I met with Eileen and we were talking about, is it time for me to switch and start a new firm? I told her that I really believe that the direction of the financial services industry has to become non-traditional. We have to go down a different path. What worked in the past doesn't work anymore, in my opinion. And now we've got to start focusing on the future. And that is focusing on millennials, that's focusing on women, and that's focusing on diversity of thought. To me, diversity of thought means get the best people that think a little differently than you do, that can bring something to the party that you didn't necessarily think of on your own, or you're not capable of thinking on your own. And when you combine all those diversities of thought, it makes you overall better as a firm, as an individual, as an entity. In the year 2020, half of the workforce in our country are going to be the millennial generation. So if we don't get on board with capturing the strengths and the talents of this young group, we're missing a great opportunity. And it's thinking that is not going to be very popular amongst the industry standards and legends as of today. And yet Eileen looked me in the eye and she said, if you know in your heart that that's the right thing to do, then go and do it.
Jim had a vision he knew would be unpopular, and he chose to insist on that vision, even if he meant losing the job offer. I respected Jim and trusted Jim. What else could I have told him but to go do it? Give people permission to lead. Give them permission to lead you. Leading means choosing to share leadership. There's a phrase in Jim's clip that really resonates with me: diversity of thought. To my mind, the third key aspect of leadership I'd like to discuss is thought leadership. Thought leadership doesn't mean that you yourself have to be constantly coming up with the new ideas. Just the opposite. It means to be open to new ideas from other people. It means continually learning. It means adopting the attitude that you can learn from every person you meet, asking thoughtful questions, accepting challenges to your preconceived notions. It means creating an environment and a culture where new ideas are not just tolerated, but actively and eagerly sought after. That's a culture that can only trickle down from above. It has to start with the leader's openness and willingness to listen. Leading means choosing to be open to new thought. As you gain experience and move to the top of your profession, there's another dimension to thought leadership. A lot more people wait to hear from you. You're a public figure. Your audience may include your entire industry, the entire business community, the entire public. You're called on to be a thought leader for all of these. And these are people that don't necessarily have to buy into what you say or go in the direction where you want to lead them, but can be positively moved by what's on your mind. A few years ago, I addressed the General Agents and Managers Association and called for a change in how the industry has been operating for half a century. A new relationship between the general agents who operate insurance agencies and the individual advisors whose work they direct. Like Jim Meehan, I knew that the industry establishment might not be open to my ideas, but like Jim, I had to go and do it. And at least one person in the audience understood what I was saying.
There was an entire ballroom full of people at a Gamma meeting. And Eileen stood up and talked about how it is so important that all the people in the room allow for advisors, for agents, to have relationships with their peers, with their managers on their terms, as if they were the client. In the career system, they don't let an agent just go from one place to another place or between career and independent. They don't do that because the manager would be upset and would lose money. And her point was, if an agent or an advisor is not receiving the value and not feeling that they want to stay with a particular leader or manager, then they should be able to decide where they go. And that was very controversial. She was the only person that spoke that day that did not get a standing ovation. And I sat there and I listened to that and I said, you know, what that really means is every day you need to bring value. Every day you need to lead people, and every day you have to do your best to not only earn those relationships, but keep those relationships. And that was really a very, very important lesson for me.
Susan was an industry leader at the top of her game, but she was open to new ideas. She got it. So I feel pretty good about saying that the speech was not totally a failure. I've also tried to exercise thought leadership in the matter of empowering women in roles they deserve. As I said before, the glass ceiling never hampered my career, not because people weren't trying to impose it, but because I wouldn't let it limit my ambition. That doesn't mean the ceiling isn't there. The numbers don't lie. It is there for too many, and it needs to be shattered. I'm on the advisory board of Drexel University's Vision 2020, a national organization that Penn Mutual helped to launch, dedicated to shared leadership between men and women. I've addressed national conferences of women in financial services and Avanta's Chief Information Forum on the subject. And I'm not just talking about it. At Penn Mutual, we're walking the walk. In fact, we're going to be called to stage at next month's meeting of the Women's Forum in New York for increasing the representation of women on our boards to 5. That's 42%. It's amazing. Thank you. Several of members of our board are in the audience, and I want to thank them here for the support as well. It's amazing that a 170-year young company is among a very small group of Fortune 1000 companies who are leading the way on gender diversity on boards. What's even more amazing about this topic is that we're still talking about it. The solution is very simple. It's about choice. It's not about the lack of talented and highly qualified women being available for these roles. It's about a very conscious decision to welcome women on boards for the talent that they bring to the table, just like I was welcomed by the men who helped me succeed. Of all the elements of leadership that I've discussed today, it's the notion of shared leadership that will make the greatest impact on you personally and on the businesses and organization you affiliate with. Look at women in financial services. After 80 years of grassroots efforts helping women advance in the financial services industry, they've just welcomed their first male on their board, Bill Stevens, a member of the Penn Mutual team. And why? Because they recognize they'll have more impact if both women and men champion their efforts. So a big thank you to the men in the room who recognize the power of women in their businesses. You are demonstrating tremendous leadership. But at the end of the day, we have to keep in mind that leadership is not an end in itself. I began by talking about choice and authenticity, and that's where I want to end it too. Not everybody wants to be a leader or wants to be a higher level leader than they are now. I've known lots of women, and men too, who've reached positions which provide them such success and fulfillment that they decline any offer of promotion. They have all the prerequisites of leadership: intelligence, imagination, ethics, charisma, except the most important one. They don't want it. That's their choice. You have to respect it. You have to make choices for yourself. You need to respect yourself, and you need to be authentic. It's in your power. You get to choose. Whenever one voice tells you you can do it, and another voice tells you, no, you can't, you have to choose. Which voice will you listen to? All of my life, there have been choices. I chose math over nursing. I chose to pursue a goal people said was impossible. I chose to ask for help. I chose to help others. I chose to put my family first, and I chose to lead. I chose to be authentic. Each of you has a different set of values that work for you. Each of you will make different choices that work for you. The most important thing to know is that you have the power to make your own rules. Define the game that works for you, and always be authentic. The only choice you shouldn't make is accepting someone else's choice for you. Everything in life is a matter of choice. Make it, and make it with confidence. Thank you. Thank you. I know they're turning up the lights for a minute, and there's 3 microphones in the audience, and I know there's a couple of minutes to take some questions. If anybody has questions, welcome to ask me anything. The mic's on. Do we have anyone at a mic? Okay, we have someone coming up. Thank you.
I'm never shy, Eileen, you know that. Good to see you. Thank you this morning. How inspiring, and what a wonderful way to start the day. So I reflected on some of the choices that you made, and it's often been said that women move into leadership roles when things are broken and can be fixed. I think there's some data out there that says, women end up in the C-suite when there are problems. Can you speak about, what it means to move into a very challenging role, to your point about choice, when there's a mess to clean up, and how you lead in a mess?
Okay, so leading during a mess. I had that, one of the stories I talked about was, I was so excited about becoming president of New England Financial, which was a MetLife company subsidiary up in Boston. And when they called to offer me that job, they had told me that they needed an answer right away because at the close of the market they had to announce a change to their stock price because of an issue that was raised, and would I be willing to take the assignment? And I said yes. But the foolish thing was, I didn't really ask too many details, but not only was the president gone, they took 4 of the key direct reports of the president out because of the accounting irregularities. So I walked into a mess. And so what I needed to do was go and talk to the people who were in the company. First of all, a really great company with a lot of people who were working really hard in the organization, and let them know that I was here to help their company succeed and not let their efforts go in vain. So I think, one of the lessons that I learned in management was to always be respectful of the past. So you step into a role, decisions were made at some point in time. You're not there to judge the decisions that were made. If you look at a car, the windshield is in front of you is this big and the rear view mirror is this small, and it's for a reason. You need to look in that rear view mirror to help guide you and learn from the past, but if you focus on that, you can't move forward. So you need to tap the people around you. I knew nothing about that organization stepping in. I had to be involved with regulators, industry officials, commissioners of insurance over the issue that was going on, but I needed my team to help me. The key leaders of my team weren't there, and I will tell you, when you ask for help, folks will help you. And some of the greatest help I got were from people who were really on the front lines, who knew what the issues were, knew what the challenges were, and knew how to support the people we had to support in order to keep the revenue coming in. So I would say come in and listen to the people around you. Ask for help. I wasn't there. I came in, I said, I don't have the answers. We need to solve this together. So that would be my advice. Okay. Hi, Jane. So for a 23-year-old woman, if I were to have to go back to give advice to myself, would have been, I always start with asking for help. You can't stand on an island, and especially if you want to move up in leadership, you can't do it alone. Oftentimes you get to a certain point because you have certain skills and abilities and people recognize that, and it's kind of about you, but then that turns around pretty dramatically. So I think if she can build a success pattern of really talking to others and taking in that information, number one. Number two is be strategic. I was strategic about my career. I had set goals for myself. I thought about ways to advance myself. I remained open to opportunities. I can't say I knew, back at 23 that I'd be standing here today, but I took them in increments. So making sure that she loves what she's doing and she's passionate. We put too many hours into our workday not to love what we're doing. So I would say to her, and I know she's a family member and working in a family business, but if you're not liking it, find something else to do. So I think she has to keep asking herself that question. Well, that's what I would tell her.
So, wow, that's a very much louder. So I had a question about hiring practices. So I always wonder, as a manager myself, is it best to hire for skill, or are credentials more important? And so, considering the fact that your profession and your successful career was rather circuitous and went back and around and again, there are people who approach looking for employment who don't have the experience in the industry in which we work, but might have skills that speak to the work, though they might not have credentials in that particular space. So could you speak a little bit about experience-based hiring decisions, credentialing, and what that could look like in terms of actual practice?
Okay, you heard Mike Martin talk about me having 50% of the requisite skills to take on what was a pretty challenging job. That division of Equitable at the time was as large as Penn Mutual is today. So I was really dealing with very highly skilled professionals who were in the business for a long time. What I had to do was sell transferable skills. So yes, you do need credentials. You need to have certain educational background. I think those kind of things are important, so to encourage folks. But I think people need to be encouraged to understand and think more broadly about how the skills that they have could fit a situation. And I wouldn't try and maneuver it in an unnatural way. As you, as the applicant, if it's not feeling natural to you, that you're really stretching to get this job, it's probably not the right fit. But I don't think you have to wait till you have 100% of the skill set to start applying for something. And you talked about skill and you talked about ability. And I do, as part of my routine practice, is I make sure I have diverse slates of individuals that I have to look for. I personally am not huge on quotas, although I aspire to have a business that is reflective of the markets that we serve. So I want to get the most talented people, but I want to give everybody a chance, the same equal chance for an opportunity and the ability to present themselves in a way. I think, again, you have to be confident in your own abilities, because how can you ask someone to have confidence in you if you don't have confidence in yourself? So I think it starts there whenever you're looking for a position.
Eileen, I was particularly struck by the segment with Mike Martin where he fought for you to get the VP title rather than simply the AVP title because he knew how important that would be. Do you have any advice for women who wouldn't find themselves in such a fortunate position where their superior is wise enough to recognize that and willing to fight for them? If he hadn't done that for you, how might you have approached it?
What I ask women to do, and I have it in my own organization, it's dangerous when I give these kind of speeches and folks from my organization are in there because they give me back my own advice, which is I tell them to ask for it. I mean, if you really believe that you deserve a title, you know in your heart you deserve it, and you've earned it, and you're relative to other people in your organization for equity, you should ask for it. You should use your voice. You may not always get what you ask for, but at least you can look yourself in the mirror and say, I asked for what I thought I deserved. Then it's a choice. If I didn't get the VP, would the AVP would have been fine for me to move forward? Mike was spot on. I needed the VP title in order to get the job done. And again, this gets back to, it wasn't the gender issue. It wasn't the fact that I was 27 and a female and these men had only worked with men who had been in the industry for 30 plus years, and now they're going to talk to me who they've been in business longer than I was on the planet. I heard that too. And so I think you have to ask for what you want. He had the great insight, and again, at the end of the day, most strong business people want to do what's best for the business, and when they see it from that perspective. But ask for what you want.
Good morning, Donna Titleman and Eileen, thank you. I've enjoyed your comments. I've heard that as artificial intelligence is coming more into the workplace with disruptive innovation, that soft skills and interpersonal communication skills are going to rise to the top of what employees need to master. So coupled with the fact that millennials are going to be a much larger part of our workforce, and then we've got sort of the face-off between the baby boomers and the millennials, what advice could you give to corporations to train those soft skills so that those two sides can meet and be successful?
Okay, I think it's a great question, and I hopefully you walk away from having heard my comments that for me soft skills mean a lot.
Exactly.
And potential, the question before I didn't answer completely was, if you don't have the skills, what is the potential? I think absolutely there will be a combination, and we're going through, I guess it's like the fourth technological revolution in the country right now, with all of the big data and technology that's available, and it will dramatically change the workforce and what we do and the work that we do and how we do it. It's happening in our business as we speak, and so I think we need to have individuals first and foremost who are open-minded and are willing to change, and that's where you start. The piece about the soft skills, I think a lot is written, if you follow management and leadership, there's finally a recognition around authenticity and the things that I talked about, which I've been employing throughout my career, which I think set me apart. I do think that will become the norm. But computers aren't the answers to everything. We are still a species who needs to interact with one another. So the person who can blend that, who has the ability to be analytical in one regard, but yet has the sensitivities of understanding how the human dynamic work, will be your leaders of tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. I think the only way it's going to happen is that we have the men join us. And, you know, I mentioned women in financial services. For 80 years, there were grassroots effort advancing women in our industry. And the representation of women in financial services about 20% broadly. And I think we've woken up and said, in order for this to work, it's about shared leadership. So I think it's about enlightenment and continuing the conversation. And I would hope that my male counterpart CEOs would be enlightened enough to recognize that having that diversity of thought, you know, whether it be gender, ethnicity, each of us have walked in a different path. Even members of the same household. We wouldn't believe that the 6 kids that grew up together in my household were actually grown up in the same household. We're not identical. So how do we leverage the talents of each of the individuals and the unique paths that they have walked? And I think that's the conversation that we need to have. And by virtue of just big numbers, we should see 30%. And my hope is that we can see it by 2020.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening.